What is going on, everybody? So, I'm back today to review another film that was recommended to me on TikTok. And this film is directed by the same filmmaker who made the film Martyrs that I reviewed not too long ago. And rather than this film being in French, this is an English language film. It was definitely an interesting experience, and I look forward to talking about it today. And the film is called Incident in a Ghostland, or now it's just referred to simply as Ghostland. Incident in a Ghostland is directed by Pascal Laugier. A mother of two inherits a home from her aunt. On the first night in the new home, she is confronted with the murderous intruders and fights for her daughter's lives. 16 years later, the daughters reunite at the house, and that is when things get strange. This film is, like I said, directed by the same filmmaker who made the film Martyrs, which, if you watch my review, I thought Martyrs was an incredible movie, very disturbing and violent, had some really interesting ideas on the concept of death and torture, and it was just a really fascinating film that was kind of hard to watch at moments, but I really appreciated it a lot. And so when I had a few people on TikTok reach out to me to watch this movie, I was really excited to see another film from this filmmaker. And this movie was not good. I have a lot of problems with it. It's really messy. The dialogue is really bad, and I wonder if some of that comes down to that this is a French filmmaker making a film with native English speakers, and that the dialogue just doesn't translate really well, and that the delivery just doesn't work. But it's so goofy and hammy, and there's just a lot wrong with it. And I'll get into it a little more when I talk about the movie as a whole. So, as the film states, you start off with this mother and her two daughters. The one daughter is really into writing horror stories. She's constantly like creating these ideas. Her sister is making fun of her because she's not into dating or doing all those things that a normal girl should be interested in. Her mother is a clearly caring and compassionate woman, and they decide that they're moving into their, I believe, aunt's house who just passed away. And they get there in the middle of the night. The house is filled with all these weird like dolls and props, and like the house is just filled with a ton of junk. It just looks ridiculous. And they're in the house, and things are seemingly normal. Well, at the beginning of the film, you see this like ice cream truck thing pull by, and somebody waves at them. The young daughter flicks the driver off. You're like, oh, this is going to come into play in the movie. So what ends up happening, that truck pulls up out front. The people get out, and it is from what it seems, it's never explained, a transgender woman and a disabled man who is like bigger built. He's bald. His face is a little deformed, and they come in and they attack the two young girls and the mother. And the mother fights them off. You cut to the daughter who writes the horror story. She's sitting on the staircase. Her sister is in the basement being attacked by that man. The mother seemingly attacks the transgender woman and attacks her and kills her. And then it cuts to her as an adult. While she's at home, she's got a son and a husband. She's at home kind of like having a nightmare about the whole situation. And she gets a call in the middle of the night from her sister. And her sister is like screaming and crying. And she looks at her husband and says, I need to go take care of my sister. And you find out that she is a prolific author now. Her works have been publicly celebrated. So she drives back out to that old house, and her sister is acting really strange, and all of this weird sort of surreal things start to happen. So in theory, the concept of this film is really interesting, but the problem is the execution is so flawed. There's not a whole lot of suspense build up in it, because you can sort of see where this film is going to go. I feel like if you look at like the French extremist movement, this film falls way more in line with the movie High Tension, which I thought was a really lame movie overall. But this film tries to build up on that idea of like trauma and overcoming past trauma, and then this relationship between this mother and her two daughters, but it's so sloppily put together that it's really hard to be invested. That time jump sequence where they become adults is a little bit ham-fisted, and there's so much introduced that you start questioning really early on, like, is this real? Is it not going to be real? So when the twist happens, it's not really all that exciting. It didn't really do anything for me. And then there's like these two bait and switches towards the end of the film that are just kind of like the director thought, okay, well, I'm going to take it in one direction, but I'm going to trick the audience and we're going to do something different. And they just weren't that clever, which was unfortunate, because I thought that the build up at the beginning was really relatively interesting. And all of the acting in this is really bad. It was really hard for me to stay invested because of how terrible the line delivery was. And a lot of this felt much much more of just, we're going to try to show some extreme things on screen, which this doesn't even graze how intense Martyrs is, or even High Tension. It's not even nearly as violent as a movie like that. It has some disturbing moments, but I think what's really interesting, and I talked about this in my High Tension video, about like the way that it sort of demonized lesbians in a very weird way that just felt kind of slimy and gross. And I talked a little bit about how I feel like you can vilify people in the LGBTQ community if you give them an interesting story, have a reason for them to be the way that they are. But at this time period, it feels really weird to just like vilify marginalized groups of people. And so this movie seemingly is vilifying a transgender woman and a mentally disabled man, which to me felt a little gross. I had a really hard time like wanting to even stay invested in the story, because I'm like, okay, why did you choose these two people to be the villains in your story? It just didn't make a whole lot of sense. Like, they're treated as almost like carnival freaks, and I don't know. Like, obviously they're evil people, but I want something a little bit more layered if that is the direction that you're going to choose to go with your villains, because these are groups of people who have already dealt with so much over the years. It's just really difficult for you not to feel kind of slimy when you're watching it. And so that didn't help it at all either. But aside from that element of the film, it's just a really not well put together movie that has a lot of bad dialogue, and the third act punch really didn't do a whole lot for me. So if you see an incident in a Ghostland or Ghostland, did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought. I did not like this movie at all. I felt like that it was really sloppily put together. The dialogue was really bad, and I just didn't really enjoy it. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, it helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to putting out more for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.